Hello everyone. So, one second. I'm trying to play some music. Shuffle.
Make sure that no state can deny any woman the ability to have access to the health care that she needs. We'll also roll back the gap rule, and we'll make sure that the Department of Justice vigorously defends women in every single courtroom. I think it's time that more men join the leadership that women have provided on this issue. I have consistently been there. I want to make sure that as president, we do everything in our power to make sure that we stand with women in every single case.
Is there any room
For those who oppose abortion, the Democratic prohibition or even my own political party. And I will continue to do that as a candidate, and I will continue to do that as president.
So you're not shifting as the party shifts?
No, I am who I am. I'm certainly showing up and listening to people and learning from them in every community, but I'm also showing up with the courage of my conviction.
Hi everyone. I can't read everyone's thing,
You can see
but I always do go back and read the next day, so, or sometime. We saw a moose today off the trail. Mooses are very dangerous. You don't want to upset a moose. So Sabrina is right here on the floor, snoozing, rubbing her stomach.
Universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care for all, comprehensive immigration reform. These are positions that I've consistently held because they are critical to the success of this country.
Hello. Hi, Cynthia.
Every single resource, every single American in the 10 years that are left to us. I say this as a Texan. We've got to free ourselves from the dependence on fossil fuels and fully embrace renewable energy technology. And right here in Iowa, put farmers in the driver's seat, pay them for the environmental services that they provide, planting cover crops to pull more carbon out of the air, precision and no-till farming, regenerative grazing to disturb less of the carbon that's in the soil. George, I'm all about bringing everyone into these solutions, regardless of the differences between us, and making sure that this badly damaged democracy fully works.
You're Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said this week she wants to see the president in prison. Do you think President Trump committed crimes that could be prosecuted?
He did. I think that's clear from what we've learned from the Mueller report, but I think those crimes might extend beyond what we've seen in the Mueller report. Using public office for personal gain for himself and for his family. The relationship that he has with Vladimir Putin, which has never been properly explained, from the invitation as a candidate to have Russia involve itself in our elections, his effort to obstruct justice, the fact that he called Vladimir Putin after the Mueller report was released, called it a hoax, thereby giving him a green light to further participate in our democracy and in our elections. If we do not hold the president accountable, we will have set the precedent that some people in this country, because of their position of power, are in fact above the law. And if we do that, we will lose this democracy forever. So regardless of the popularity of the idea or what the polling shows us, we must proceed with impeachment so we get the facts and the truth, and that at the end of the day, there is justice for what was done to our democracy in 2016 and the other potential crimes that this president has committed.
It's pretty clear that even if the House impeaches, the Senate is not going to convict the president. So if you win, if you become president in 2020, would you want your Justice Department to pursue charges against President Trump?
I would want my Justice Department, any future administration's Justice Department, to follow the facts and the truth, and to make sure at the end of the day that there is accountability and justice. Without this idea, this experiment of American democracy comes to a close. has yet to be brought to justice. So yes, at the end of the day, justice is important, in fact, foundational for the success of this country, no matter who that is, including the person who holds the most important office in the land.
Very well. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, George.
We have the roundtable weigh in on 2020 next. We'll be right back.
When you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get to a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes. Set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/ABC. Search for greatness. Search Indeed.
Capital One is building a better bank, one that feels and acts nothing like a typical bank. It's why they're reimagining banking and building something completely different. Capital One Cafe. They offer accounts with no fees or minimums. They also offer one of the best savings rates in America. And you can open a Capital One account from anywhere in 5 minutes. Capital One. This is banking reimagined. Open an account today and experience banking reimagined for yourself. Capital One. What's in your wallet? Capital One. N.A. Member FDIC.
We have a president who wakes up every day and tries to divide the American people.
Right now, we have a president of the United States, who leads hate and division.
We have a president who is so small-minded and so petty in his instincts. We in the LGBTQ community know when we hear phrases like "Make America Great Again," that American past was never quite as great as advertised.
19 Democrats in Iowa this weekend. Pretty consistent message you saw right there about President Trump. Let's talk about it on our roundtable with our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce, Eliana Johnson, White House correspondent for Politico, Chris Christie, the former GOP governor of New Jersey, now ABC News contributor, and Patrick Gaspar, the president of the Open Society Foundation, served as White House political director and ambassador to South Africa under President Obama. So put on your political director hat to begin with, Patrick. I take that as point. These polls don't make all that much in June, but there is a trend there for better or worse. When you look at the entire constellation of what we're seeing now, what do you make of it?
Well, I think that the horse race I wouldn't put too much stock in right now. It's far too early, but there is really something interesting that emerged from that poll. 2/3 of all likely Iowa caucus participants said that they would much rather have someone who they believe can beat Donald Trump in the fall of next year instead of somebody who shares their position on individual issues. It's really powerful and speaks to the fact that electability really seems to be cohering as a primary point for Democrats in the cycle against Donald Trump, and you would suspect that should benefit a candidate like Joe Biden.
You know, and that is the question, Chris Christie. How long can Biden hold on? He's one of the few Democrats not going up to Iowa this week. Instead, he's going to go there the same day as President Trump on Tuesday.
Listen, I think I saw the same numbers Patrick saw. The question is, how does that manifest itself? Now, when you look at Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren getting 31% of the vote combined in Iowa, that doesn't speak to electability to me. Yeah, Biden still has a lead, and it's going to be a challenge for him to keep it. But there is still enormous energy in the far left progressive side of this. You can see that through a lot of these numbers. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how Biden deals with that.
It's divide and conquer.
Well, I think listen, the general strategy, as you know, would be keep them all in, he won't say a bad thing about anybody. He'll be saying great things about everybody on that stage if he's smart, and keep them all in, keep them all active, divide it up, and, in that instance, that 24% could win.
Yeah, he could. One of the things you saw, Mary, is that even with better was sliding, but Mary, big surge over the last month.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch his trajectory, too. He clearly is getting a lot of attention. We saw him out there this weekend. And when it comes to Biden, I do think it's interesting the fact that he's not showing up here, right? He's been taking this really sort of hands-off approach, this sort of wait-and-see style, and it does seem to be working based on the polls. He has that name recognition. He doesn't have to go out and attract the same kind of attention. The question is, how long can that last, and whether it was worth a debate.
Yeah, maybe hands-off, but he certainly was listening this week. He first had that position that came in and said he supported the Hyde Amendment, and then every other candidate pounced and he shifted pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Governor, I'll be shocked if the president is lavishing praise on everybody on a debate. No. I was going to say. But, as for Biden and the Hyde Amendment, you can change your position or not.
the way it comes down to how you handle it. And I don't think Biden handled this with the confidence of a frontrunner. He took a couple days. He had Cedric Richmond, his campaign co-chairman, go out and say he was maintaining his old position, then came out and changed it. He looked weak, I think. And the Trump campaign's theory has been that Biden's going to have trouble surviving a Democratic primary because he's going to be pulled to the left. This is the first evidence I think we've seen of that, and if it continues, I think it's going to be difficult for him, even if he does win the primary, to challenge Trump in a general election. He's considered the electable candidate because he's the most moderate of the bunch, and I think this was a difficult instance for him.
That's a great point, and I think that Biden's wobbliness on this issue really spoke to Elizabeth Warren restraints. She managed to take this issue and take it from one of reproductive freedom and turned it into an economic inclusion argument inside of the Democratic Party, and Joe Biden doesn't want to be on the wrong side of that.
Well, there's no way you can hold on to that position to your primary. I guess the counter argument is that it's June, it's 2 days. As long as it's not better for him to get rid of it now.
Yeah, but it does raise a lot of questions going forward, right? If his argument is that in some ways he's that moderate who can appeal to those Trump voters, get them back over voting with Democrats, it raises questions if he's seen as being a shapeshifter, right? If he's seen as going to the left to try and appeal to those voters. That may help him in a primary, but what does that mean in a general? And to Eliana's point, it also raises questions about his campaign's handling of this. They still are struggling to answer what happened between Wednesday, when he said he still supported this, and Thursday, just 24 hours later, when he changed his position. That raises questions about whether or not he can take on Trump, and his argument that he simply is the best one to do
Yeah,
that.
I think it's a lot less substantive, George, than it is a concern about Joe Biden personally, right? The concern about Joe Biden is he never stays on the rails. That every time he's run for president, he's gone off the rails on one issue or another. And this is a judgment issue on Joe Biden's part. Let me say one other thing about Mayor Pete. I'm willing to predict today, Mayor Pete is the new Beto. Okay, Mayor Pete is going to have this surge. He's had this surge now. But there's no there. And I think what you're going to see with him is the same thing you saw are seeing with Beto O'Rourke, which is, there's a certain stylistic appeal to him, but he is still the 37-year-old mayor of South Bend, Indiana. And when those lights get on, I suspect that it's not going to be kind to him. I think he's going to wind up in Beto territory much sooner than he's going to wind up in Biden territory.
It may be way too early to make those kinds of forecasts, Governor, but you had another important point there that this was a judgment issue for Joe Biden. I think the judgment is, 55% of the likely Democratic electorate will be women. And that's the judgment that he had to make in his flip on.
That's why I said not substantive, Patrick. What I'm saying is that this is about Joe Biden's style, the way he makes decisions, and how he presents himself to the public. And his appeal is he's the stable, steady, moderate guy who's going to be able to be contrasted to a president who at times seems erratic and hyperbolic, right? If he loses that, it's over for him, done, because he doesn't appeal to where the energy is substantively in the Democratic Party right now. So if he can't make that electability issue that 2/3 want, if he can't make that argument, he's done.
Well, I think that's exactly right. As an isolated incident, this might not matter, but I think it recalled the way Biden handled before he announced the allegations from these women that he made them uncomfortable, where he went into hiding for 5 days and we weren't sure what he was going to say, and he was a little wobbly when he came out then. So if this is a pattern, the way he handles controversial issues, that's going to be tough. It's not a good sign. If this is a one-off, it won't matter at all.
And yes, one of the questions is how closely are people paying attention to all this happening right now? Can he right the ship in time for the debates when people really start to focus in?
Yeah, and the debates, he goes into that with a giant target on his back, right? Everyone's coming after him, and he's going to try and frame it as a debate between him and Donald Trump. Biden is prone to gaffes. Biden has also come under a lot of criticism. Can he withstand the pressure and the rigorous schedule of campaigning? How is he going to handle a stage where he is taking all of that oncoming fire?
And Patrick, I wonder, even there's a little bit of a hint of criticism from Beto of Joe Biden. So far, except for on that Heidemann, that the other candidates have not been willing to take him off.
Not frontally, but increasingly you're hearing them make contrasts that are generational. Even Bernie Sanders, who's not exactly a spring
generational,
just recently said, we can't go back to the politics of the past in a clear, direct reference to Joe Biden. So I think that's only going to increase, and the debates will be like duck hunting season with Joe Biden being the duck there. But I've worked closely with Joe Biden. I've known him for a long time, and one should not underestimate his toughness, his ability to adapt. And I will recall in 2016 when he saved Barack Obama, who had performed really poorly in the first debate, and Joe Biden came out and just acquitted himself so well that it changed the narrative. I wouldn't underestimate Joe Biden.
I think your point before, George, applies to what you just said about the candidates and how they're going after Biden. It's too early. It's too early for them to go after Biden and make themselves a target. You might remember 2016. Remember the early guys who went after Trump, right? Rick Perry, dead. Rand Paul, dead. It's too early for that. And I think that Biden, again, as I said before, he will try to make it against Trump in the debate. But what he's also going to do is he's going to lavish praise on all of them to make it more difficult for them to go after him. Oh, Elizabeth, I loved when you supported this bill you sponsored. Oh, Beto, you bring great energy to the campaign and you went after Ted Cruz, and we all love that. And Joe Biden, as you know, has that personal affability that many of those other people on that stage don't have.
But I will say this week, even if they're not taking him on directly, there was a change in tone out on the campaign trail. I mean, whether or not they said Biden's name, they skewered him on the Hyde Amendment. And whether the campaign will admit it or not, that political pressure was pretty hard for him too.
No question about it. Got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Why does it seem like Mexico's being
because it's their fault also, because they're letting millions of people walk up through their country, and they shouldn't let anybody walk up through their country. I mean, frankly, we shouldn't even have to have border patrol.
Mexico will take unprecedented steps to increase enforcement to curb irregular migration. Those crossing the U.S. southern border to seek asylum will be rapidly returned to Mexico, where they may await the adjudication of their asylum claims.
President Trump pulls back the tariff threat after Mexico agrees to accelerate those ideas to contain migrants inside Mexico. I want to talk about it more on our roundtable. Eliana Johnson, we start with you. The president, in a long tweet this morning, complaining about a New York Times story that basically Mexico just gave him what they had already agreed to. But we have seen something of a pattern here with the president.
I was going to say, the president's negotiating style, I think, is becoming eerily familiar in Washington, where he makes maximalist threats, whether it's on North Korea or that he was going to close the southern border if Mexico didn't stop illegal immigrants and drugs from coming in late March into early April, or to impose an escalating series of tariffs. Just this past week lasts about a week. And then he strikes an imperfect or constitutionally questionable deal and declares victory and savages the critics of that deal. That's what happened just this past week. And I think it raises the question of whether his threats are going to have the desired effect going forward, now that I think many people, including his negotiating partners across the table, have spotted the pattern.
In this case, Mary, he may not have had much of a choice given what you're seeing on Capitol Hill. The Republicans, this was their most defiant revolt yet among Senate Republicans.
Yes, this was some really intense pushback from the president's own party. Mitch McConnell, as fired up as Mitch McConnell gets, going out there and essentially saying, Mr. President, do not do this. I mean, even some of the president's allies like Ted Cruz were out there publicly blasting the move, saying it would amount to a massive tax increase. I think to Eliana's point, that the more the president threatens, the more the pushback has to get ratcheted up as this kind of governing by threatening continues to happen over and over and over again. Republicans I've talked to this weekend are clearly breathing a very deep sigh of relief, but Democrats are quick to point out that, first of all, we don't know whether this deal is going to actually do anything to stop the flow of migrants across the border, and this threat is not off the table just yet.
Well, the president's made that clear.
He could do this.
He said that in the tweet this morning. But Patrick, on the other hand, Mexico has accelerated these agreements. They're putting them into place. They had to put them into place before. Isn't a win-win?
No, a win is not a win when a deal. He's falsely hyping a deal that was struck some months ago that we know is probably insufficient to the challenge. Let's be clear about what's really happening here. I know Americans, through the news media, are focused on Mexico in this challenge, but this story is really not about Mexico. It's about migrants who are coming from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, from the Northern Triangle, and they are a very different class of migrants than we saw in years past. You used to have lone Mexican men who come, find work, send money back home. It's not what you have now. You have whole families that are coming as a consequence of pressures of climate shifts in the Northern Triangle. We have a 5-year drought there now, and precipitation that's moving to other parts of the region. Any president of the U.S. should be working with Mexico and with that region to mitigate the climate crisis and the climate crisis also in some of the human rights oppressions that exist in those countries. We should be partnering with Mexico now, not making idle threats and lifting up deals that just do nothing to mitigate the crisis.
Listen, the president had a really good week, George, and a win is a win. The fact is that he was on the world stage on the 75th anniversary of Normandy, gave a very good speech at Normandy, I think, in regard to that anniversary. Had what was, I think, a really good visit with the royal family.
They seem to love the Queen.
Yeah, listen, they seem to get along really well, and that's the reports I'm getting from inside as well, were that they really did get along in a way that was very positive.
Not so much
pleasant.
London Mayor.
Well, again, that's pretty predictable. And so, listen, the thing that I found most encouraging about the Mexico situation was who he had at the table. He had the vice president there and he had the secretary of state. And I think those are the people with that type of experience and that type of background who we need to be negotiating these things going forward. The fact is the president does better when he takes the best people from his administration and puts them up front. And on this instance, I think the vice president and the secretary of state calmed this down and cooled it down. And that's what the president wanted from the beginning anyway.
Puts them up front to accomplish what exactly? We already know that in the last year, the result of the Trump tariffs have absolutely wiped out any gains from the lowering of taxes, and we also know quite clearly that some of these tariffs are having their greatest impact on some of Donald Trump's base in the Heartland and at the Heartland and the border state. Sure. But let me just go back to your point, Governor, about the trip overseas. It was really quite striking to see a president of the United States sitting in front of the graves of American troops who lost their lives in Normandy, making the ultimate sacrifice, and going after war veterans and heroes like Bob Mueller, and making the kind of statements that he was making about those who are coming from Latin America, seeking humanitarian relief. That's the real big takeaway shot from his
that's not the big takeaway shot. That's the big takeaway shot if you watch some of the networks that are clearly negative towards the president. You can't say it's a bigger takeaway shot than him sitting with the Queen. You can't say it's a bigger takeaway shot than him standing on Normandy or being with President Macron, who again he had a very positive, productive conversation.
Whether it's bigger or not, it was part of the story this week. And Mary, one of the things we were seeing was he was attacking Nancy Pelosi. Let's show that this was in Fox after she said he should be in prison.
I think she's a disgrace. I actually don't think she's a talented person. I've tried to be nice to her because I would have liked to have gotten some deals done. She's incapable of doing deals. She is a terrible person, and I'll tell you, her name, it's Nervous Nancy, because she's a nervous wreck.
I don't talk about the president when I'm in the country. That's my principle.
Right before she left, she did say she wanted to see him in prison, and we've really seen an evolution of Nancy Pelosi's discussions of the president and impeachment as she faces more pressure from her caucus.
Yeah, in a matter of weeks, she has gone from saying that the president isn't even worth impeaching now to saying that he should be going to prison. And
because she wants to hold off impeachment.
Because she wants to hold off impeachment. I mean, and she did take quite a whack at him right before he goes overseas, and then she arrives overseas and says, no, I'm not going to criticize him there. But Pelosi is essentially trying to walk this fine line. She's ratcheting up the rhetoric as the pressure gets ratcheted up on her. She's throwing some red meat to the base and to those Democrats who are calling for impeachment, but she is not changing her position just by changing the rhetoric. She still insists that they need to be pursuing the investigation.
We actually never saw Nancy Pelosi make a statement about Donald Trump going to prison. That's something that purportedly
but it was made in private, and they don't dispute it.
It's not the same as standing in front of graves of American troops at Normandy and blasting.
Let me tell you something. She earned that one, Patrick. She earned it. Okay, if you're going to say you want to see the president of the United States in prison, then she earned a shot. I know the shot against him.
I know you were at a convention where the lock her up chant was commonly refrained, but I think there's quite a bit of difference between taking a shot from the president. Donald Trump could attack and doing that at that sacred site.
Well, one thing that struck me about Pelosi's approach to dealing with Trump that I think could be a lesson for Democratic presidential candidates is that she hasn't reacted to every Trump provocation by lavishing him with attention or ratcheting up the rhetoric against him. The prison thing aside, I mean, she was saying that to fend off calls of impeachment from her caucus. She's generally treated him like he's not worth giving attention to or like he's beneath contempt, and that seems to be effective.
I love hearing the prison thing aside. The prison thing aside. You can't put the prison thing aside. When you say you think the president of the United States wants in prison, you want to see him in prison, you've got to expect a reaction to that. And that's what she wanted because she is succumbing to her own political pressure. So that's not an excuse. It's an explanation, but it's not an excuse.
Help when the president spoke out and Nancy Pelosi.
Right. Pelosi knows exactly what she's doing, right? She may not respond to every provocation from the president, but she also knows very well how to get under his skin. And she clearly is doing that. She now has a nickname. That's a clear sign of that. The putting him in prison thing is Pelosi trying to make the argument, right? She's trying to satisfy all of this increasing pressure, but also buy herself some time, essentially. And the sooner
that's an explanation, not an excuse. Once you decide to make that statement, you're going to get a reaction. Now, I also think, George, that the president's press staff served him poorly in two instances in Europe, putting him in front of Piers Morgan and putting him in that interview at that site with Laura Ingraham. That does not serve the president well. When you give him that long a period of time to do those kind of things, and they're going to ask those kind of questions and follow up, that's what, you know this, I know this, anybody who's been in political campaigns and political situations, the staff's job is to not put the principal in a situation where you put him at greater risk of harm than greater risk of benefit. And I'd argue that when Sarah Sanders, whoever made those decisions to put him in those positions, put him there, they ill-served him.
That is the last word for today. Thank you all very much.
Detention Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Redheads Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. I was totally excited and pleased when I heard about 49 Muslims were killed and many more were wounded in New Zealand. This is a great start. Let's hope and pray that it continues here in the good old USA.